Hello and welcome to a standard deck profile. Today I want to talk about my new favorite meme deck, Arroz con Leche. This is the long-awaited support for the Divine Sister archetype, and archetype is doing a lot of heavy lifting here. Really, the Divine Sisters are a group of assorted commons and rares that have basically no synergy with each other, but do have some synergy with Arroz con Leche. And you're trying to force a bunch of these low-powered, unplayable cards into an effective winning strategy. But the good news is that Arroz con Leche is pretty good at doing that. So I've actually been able to get tops at my locals 2 weeks in a row with this deck. I got a third place and a second place. And the games I lost were really close. So we're actually not too far from this deck being reasonably playable. Really, it just needs some more Divine Sisters with good effects. If they ever print direct support for this, I could see this deck being a pretty good off-meta pick to beat down people with at your locals. So let's get into the deck. We're starting with our grade 0 in the ride line. This is generic. It can be any grade 0 you want. Then we have Knight of Heavenly Lasting Tranquilia. This is our best grade 1 option we have, because we don't have a good Divine Sister grade 1. But this card will at least be generically useful. It has, when this unit is wrote upon, you reveal 3 cards with different grades from hand. You look at the top 5 from your deck, and you choose up to 1 grade 1 or less unit card from among them, call it to R, and then shuffle the deck. And if you did not call a card, you may call this card to R. So this is really important for making sure we have early rush on turn 2, which is essential. We are a beatdown deck. We want to turn cards sideways as often as possible, as early as possible, to try to drag the opponent up to high damage so that we can finish them off with a Persona Ride turn. This deck does not have good defense, nor does it plus that much. We really can't afford for the game to go long against basically anything in the meta. Then we have our grade 2, Divine Sister Gateau Basque. You pretty much have to play this grade 2. It's the only Divine Sister that does anything in the ride deck, and we really need to have at least one Divine Sister guaranteed in Soul. This card has the effect that when you would ride from the ride deck, you can ride with Soul Blast 1 instead of discarding a card from your hand, which is a pretty solid effect. A free ride is always good. And then we have Divine Sister Arroz con Leche. This card has act on V once per turn, CB1. Look at the top 7 cards of your deck and choose up to 2 cards of Divine Sister from among them and reveal them. Let me see if I can get this closer. There we go. Reveal them. Choose a card from among the revealed cards and put it in hand, and call the other Divine Sister to R, and then put the cards not chosen on the bottom of the deck in any order. Keep in mind that's the bottom, not shuffle, so if you saw 5 triggers in there, go ahead and cry. Then we have auto on V. When this unit attacks, Soul Blast a Divine Sister, and choose one of your rear guards with Divine Sister in its card name and stand it, and it gets red text when this unit attacks. It gets 5k until end of battle for each of its grades, and then at the end of the battle, you put it into Soul. So you're going to clear your board every turn, or your front row at least. And then until it gets this red text until end of turn, and if you Soul Blasted a card with the same name as this unit, so if you Soul Blast another Arroz con Leche, choose 2 cards instead of 1, so you get a front row restand instead. And if you'll notice, this 5k ability for each grade means we're heavily incentivized to play grade 3 attackers. That's going to be important later. That does mean this deck is going to play a lot of grade 3s, which means it's going to have fake hand syndrome. So that's our ride line. Also, just take a moment to admire the art. I think this card looks really good personally. I'm really happy with the design, and this deck perfectly captures the aesthetic of Battle Sisters if you played Oracle Think Tank and other formats, although it does not mechanically fit with Battle Sisters in basically any other way. So now we get into the main deck, and we're starting with 3 copies of Divine Sister Arroz con Leche. We want to Persona Ride every single turn that we are legally allowed to do so, and this is going to help us with that. This is the only way we can get 5 attacks is if we have one of these in Soul, so we need to find one of these at all costs. Do not mulligan any copies of Persona Ride. Then we have our other grade 3s, 4 copies of Divine Sister Kunafa to start us off. This is one of the best options we can possibly play in this deck, and it is a common. And that's going to be a recurring theme here. At the end of the battle, this unit attacked. If the unit was placed on R by your Vanguard's ability, or this card was stood by your Vanguard's ability, you get to put it into Soul as a cost and then choose one of your units and it gets 5k. Since our Vanguard is already going to put the unit we chose into Soul, we might as well use this effect to do it. So we have some minor micro synergy there. And giving another unit 5k can help us potentially hit a magic number and, maybe just barely push past what shield the opponent has. And it's a grade 3, so it's going to get plus 15 when it gets stood by the Vanguard, making it 28 minimum. Then we have 4 copies of Divine Sister Bune. I think that's how you pronounce it. This is the best 3 in the deck, and it's one of the best Divine Sisters we can play. It is, again, a common. So what this card does is when it's placed on R from deck, it gets 15k until end of turn. This is originally Leal Immorta support, which would, bind a card and then search the deck for a card of the same name and call it. In this deck, it's pretty good. If we call it with our Vanguard skill, we get a free 28k attacker. We have a few other ways to call it as well, so we're not just all in on finding out the Vanguard, but this is our highest power attacker, and we're going to restand it, give it another 15k, and it's going to be even bigger. Like a 43k beat stick is nothing to scoff at, even though it doesn't do anything else. No plussing, no searching, no additional shield value, no interacting with the opponent's board, nothing. And our other grade 3, also nothing. No plussing, no shield value, no interacting with anything, no searching any cards, no counter charge or other resource generation, except it does technically build soul. That's the state we're working with. And these are the 2 best Divine Sisters we can play. So when I say that Divine Sister support is bad, I mean it is bad. If we ever get good grade 3 Divine Sisters to replace one or both of these cards with, this deck could be a lot better. Next, we have 4 copies of Divine Sister Biscotti. This is, I think, the only triple rare Divine Sister, as far as I know. What this card does is, when it's put on G from hand or discarded from hand for riding from the ride deck, you can CB1 or EB3 and draw a card. And then when this unit is placed on R, if you Persona roll this turn, CB1 or EB3 and look at the top 3 cards of the deck, choose one of them and put it on the top, and then put the rest on the bottom in any order. And if it's not the battle phase, you can call that card instead of putting it on top. So this is another way to call Divine Sister Bune, and that is pretty good. It also is a way to stack triggers for our drive checks to try to force through lethal. Like if you see the OT, just leave it on top. And overall, it's also a good card for value generation, for riding up, or for guarding with early. So it's essential that we play 4. It's also a Divine Sister, so, it's a target to restand with our Vanguard skill. Although, you should not be restanding grade 2s if you can help it, because they only get 10k. So, next up, we have the rest of our grade 2s, starting with Divine Sister Language Chat. This card is another Divine Sister common. Actually, this one is a rare, I think, technically. Ooh, we're moving up in the world. This card is continuous on R. If you have a grade 3 or greater card in your soul, it gets boosted 5k. We're not going to have that until at least turn 3. And even then, to get it on turn 3, we have to play in a little bit of a convoluted way. We would have to use our Vanguard skill to stand a grade 3 in the other column, and something like this, for instance, and put this into soul to then get the effect for this for the last column to swing it boosted with for 15. Worth noting, it doesn't need to be in the back row to get the 15k or the 5k power and boost. So this is a 15k beat stick if you have a grade 3 in soul, which is, again, not the worst number. But these are good because you can call them as grade 2s to rush down the opponent with, and then you can move them to back row and boost with them in the mid to late game. Then we have the only non-budget card in this deck, really. 2 copies of Gallant Mechanical Agility, Valtrosa, and Liel. You do not need these at all. You can play whatever you want in this spot, and it won't matter. You could consider Drilling Angels if you want to be able to put Arroz con Leches from drop back into Soul so that you can get 5 attacks more consistently, even if you brick up Persona. That's an option. You could play Blitz Orders for defense, or you could just play other generic keter cards that generate value. There is actually another build of this that is much less budget that has the keter box package, and I'll recommend you at the end of this what cards to take out for that. Then we have 4 copies of Divine Sister Dacoits. This is a really bad card, but we have to play it because it's one of the only... Oh, this is a double rare. And we are moving up in the world. This is one of the only high rarity cards we can play. What this does is when your other unit is placed by card ability, you can CB1 and draw. That's all it does. There's more text here, but that's for Solarian decks only. We're not allowed to use that text. So this is really just to synergize with Valtros and Liel or with the Vanguard skill. We just get to spend another CB to get another draw. The only CB we have to spend in this deck to function is on the Vanguard's top 7 check to call. We technically don't need that to function, but it's really useful for getting the grade 3 out of deck to get the plus 15 power. And so we generally want to activate it every turn. It's also a way to check the top 7 for Persona rides. So in general, we're going to be activating that every turn. And so this card can be used if we have a second CB to use, and we're planning on taking damage on the next turn, so that we're going to have CB again. And it's also just an 8k booster, which is not phenomenal. Half of the games I don't even get to use the CB1 and draw, but it's nice to have it. Then we have 2 copies of Divine Sister S'more. When this unit boosts, 2 or more rear guards were placed this turn. This unit gets 2k, so it's a 10k booster, and then at the end of the battle you put this into Soul. So this is another way to kind of get Divine Sisters into Soul, to hopefully set up so that you can keep restanding. Generally speaking, you're always going to have at least one Divine Sister in Soul, though, because your Vanguard will eat the unit that you gave the restand to. But if you played 4 of these, you could potentially play a different ride line without the Gato Basque, and you could try to just hope you see one of these before turn 3. Not recommended. And then we have 1 copy of Divine Sister Facciata. This is auto on R once per turn. When your drive check reveals a trigger, you can Soul Blast 2 and countercharge. Really the only efficient countercharge we have access to that's also within archetype. We could probably cut this for Dissection Angel when that card comes out, because that card will also draw a card when it boosts. And so that will be probably just a better version of this effect, and we can afford to lose 1 Divine Sister name. Honestly, S'mores synergize pretty well with this, so I'm wondering if in the future I might cut down 1 or 2 copies of Dacoys and put in another countercharger and maybe another S'more. Then we have our PGs, pretty standard stuff, just 3 normal unit PGs and 1 Elementaria. Just make sure your normal unit PGs have the clause that when you have 1 or less cards, they're free. Then we go into our other orders. We have 2 copies of A Warrior's Rest. What this card does is you can play it for Energy Blast 2, and then you choose 2 units on V or R, and they get red text. During the battle this unit is boosted, it gets an additional 10k power. And then if you have 5 more units, you draw a card. Worth noting that this effect will only apply to the battle that they boosted, and not for the rest of their turn. So that's going to affect your math a little bit, and it's been some confusion when I've played this at locals. But you're going to basically have a 5 unit board at all times, so getting to draw a card off this is nice. Energy Blast 2 is not a steep cost, and it can help you with your attack patterns a little bit. You now, with this card, have the option of boosting on the first swing to get a pretty decent sized number, and then get another decent sized number on the restand, because the Vanguard will get 15k to the grade 3s at restands. This also is good if you're using Language Chat. Language Chat needs a grade 3 in Soul to get boost and plus 5k. Sometimes your only grade 3 in Soul will be the Divine Sister Arroz con Leche that you plan to Soul Blast for the restand. However, if you have this order, you can boost on the first swing to get a really big attack, and then when you get the Vanguard bonus after the restand, that kind of makes up for not having the booster anymore, and you're okay with your Language Chats getting turned off. And then you can have grade 3s in Soul again, because the Vanguard will eat the units that you gave the restand to. Next we go to the triggers, playing 4 Vanilla Heals. As always, Vanilla Heals are solid and consistent, but in the format we're in, Blangdemeyer, Bafsagra, and Aleglima all use both restanders and additional crit by card effect, not triggers. So that means that the crit heals and the restand heals are pretty solid right now. So if you want, you could play 2 of those in place of 2 normal unit grade 0 heals. I would not recommend playing more than 2, because those are 10k heals in the early game, and that means that they are not going to help you when you need to OT to pass a grade 2 Vanguard swinging into your grade 1 or something like that. whereas these will, and these are good in every matchup, whereas the effect heals are only good in the matchup that uses the thing that they're designed to counter. Then we go into the rest of our triggers. We are playing 8 crits, 4 vanilla crits, and 4 Blade Feather Dragons, the soul crit. You can just play 8 vanilla crits if you want. These crits are not that important, but them going into soul does help Facciata. Then we have 3 effect fronts, Alpax, not the soul fronts. These getting 20k shield is a big deal because the defense in this deck is very weak. We don't plus that many cards, we only get Twin Drive, and we have a lot of grade 3s in this deck. We're playing 11 grade 3s in the main deck, and 2 normal orders that don't have any shield value. So having access to additional shield in the triggers is very important. Plus, fronts are really good in a deck that's going to restand its front row after the Vanguard swing. Then we have the Keter OT. This is, you could probably play whatever OT you want. I wouldn't play the red OT because the units that you stand with Arroz con Leche are going to go into soul at the end of the battle they attacked. And that means that you won't get the full restand effect unless you were only going for a 4 attack turn anyways, which is not ideal. We should assume that we need to be on Persona Ride every turn to win the game, and that means that we shouldn't plan for the scenario where we can't, because those are the games that are probably unwinnable, even with red OT, to be honest. Blue OT is also good, giving crit and 100 million or something, and picking up a card from drop means we could do something like pick up the Persona Ride that we soul blasted out. But the reason I'm playing the Keter OT is because, 1, we don't reduce our deck size that much, so we're unlikely to lose the game to deck out. But we will have 2 grade 3s with Twin Drive to attack with after the Vanguard swing. So that gives us 4 more checks at a trigger, meaning we can potentially hit crits or heals and get ourselves out of an unwinnable situation. And really the only other OT that could do that for us would be maybe the purple OT, which could pick up a card from damage, but it's not reliable. And so we're going to rely on the Keter OT to get us both the most kill pressure and also the most chances at hitting multiple crits or heals to sack our way out of a game. If you don't want to play this one, I strongly recommend the blue OT, which will do something similar. It'll give us a chance of sacking our way out of the game, and it can also pick up perfect cards or Arroz con Leche to set up for the next turn. So that is our main deck. Real quick, before we show any test hands, I want to show you what you would cut if you wanted to play Keter Box. The only actual Divine Sisters you need are the 8 grade 3s that are not the Persona Rides. So everything else is flexible. I'll assume for the moment that we want to keep playing Energy Cyclers. I think that's a fair assumption. We could cut these 2 Valtrosas and Liels. We could cut 4 copies of this card because we're going to have a better Counterblast spender. And we can cut these 2 Divine Sisters as well. And these 2 Warrior's Rests are also up for grabs here because we're going to play a different order. This gives us room to play 3 of the... we actually need 1 more cut, sorry. So we would cut probably either 1 more copy of Language Chat, or we can cut the Facciata, depending on whether you want Counterblast more or grade 2 boosters more. Because you're adding a bunch of good boosters, though, let's assume that we want to cut the Language Chat. So this gives us 3 spaces for the Wisdom Order, Wisdom of Beginning that ruled the world or something like that. It's the Minerva Order. And then this gives us room for 4 copies of Teeth Fault, and then 4 copies of Sergown. This lets you essentially have the optimal early rush that you could possibly have in Keter right now. Unfortunately, they still won't give any deck better early rush than that, and it is pretty solid early rush. That is technically a more optimal way to play the deck. It'll give you more card draw, it'll give you selection, it'll give you a guaranteed board building experience early on, but it'll cost a lot more money. It doubles or triples the cost of the deck right now. So I don't own Keter Box, so I decided to build this as an actual Divine Sister deck using Divine Sister names because I thought that would be more fun anyways. But if you want to actually play Divine Sisters and have the best chance of winning, playing Keter Box would probably be better, but it will skyrocket the cost of this deck. It also will technically give you slightly higher brick chances. There will be some number of games where you don't have 2 Divine Sisters in the front row because you're not playing as many Divine Sisters here. It also will mean that this Vanguard skill will whiff slightly more often because you'll check the top 7 and you'll see Teeth Vaults and Sergowns instead of seeing these Divine Sisters. But that is just a side rant. We can now get into what the attack patterns might look like. We're going to assume that we are on a Persona Ride turn. We're going to assume we Soul Blasted something for the grade 2 part of the ride deck. And we're going to assume that on the previous turn we Soul Blasted the grade 2 Gato Basque in order to make sure that we could get a 4-attack turn. And now we have Persona Road. We're going to need a bunch of damage. Let's say we have a copy of this order in hand, and that we have these 4 cards in damage, for instance, as our CB. This order is going to be important later. Ideally, we're going to want to have used the Vanguard skill to add this card to the board, and maybe this card to hand. We don't need to get much luckier than that. If theoretically we rushed with language chats, we could have a language chat in the back. We could have something like a S'more behind the Vanguard. And ideally, we would have a second language chat. But let's say that for now, we think that's unrealistic, and we want instead to have a Facciata over here. It's going to be fun. So this is a Persona Ride turn. So let's start representing those power numbers with dice in order to help the visual aid. So we are going to have 10k to the front row, of course. Because we called this Bune from deck by card effect, it's going to get another plus 15. So let's roll this over to plus 25 total. This card will have another plus 5 because we have a grade 3 in Soul here. And then we have no other bonuses on anything currently. This is a 10k booster, but I'm not going to represent that with dice because we'll just remember that it's 10k. And then let's shuffle the deck up. Well, let's assume I had about like a 5-card hand or so. I'm just going to grab 5 things out of here. And say we drew a card for Persona, I guess. These cards literally don't matter. We're going to pretend like they're not even there. We're just doing this to simulate our deck size after all this so that our trigger checks are more realistic. So we're going to shuffle the deck here. All right, and then we're going to play a Warrior's Rest for EB2. I'm going to assume we have the energy. So a Warrior's Rest has the effect that we'll choose 2 units. We're going to choose these 2 front row units. They'll get 10k when they're boosted, which is really solid. Given this board state, we have 2 routes to using this language chat, and I'll show both here. So let's go into battle first. This is a smaller number, so we'll swing here for 31, which is going to be guarded by a 20k shield front, but otherwise we'll demand 2 cards out of the opponent's hand or from play. Then we can swing over here, or sorry, if we use the order, sorry, this is 10k higher. So this will actually be 33-41, which is going to demand 2 cards of the opponent's hand, basically no matter what. Then we can swing here. This unit will get another 10k for this battle only. This one goes back down to 10k. And this is going to be 35, 48, 53, 63, if I've done the math correctly. That's going to be a gigantic swing. If the opponent's at 5 damage, these are really scary numbers, and they have to guard all of them if they're at 5. Then we swing with the Vanguard, boosted of course, and we can Soul Blast out the Arroz con Leche from the ride deck. This will let us stand these 2 units. They will get the red text that they go to Soul after the battle they attacked, and they'll get an additional, this card can lose its one of its 10Ks, they get an additional plus 15. So we'll cancel that out by showing a 30 here to make that more easy to parse. And then we need to add another, we were at 15 and 10. So we need to add 15 here. So we need to add a 20 and a 5. There we go. Or add a 10 and a 5. So this is now a 53k attacker. And this is going to go up to a 38k attacker. Which is pretty solid overall. Then the Vanguard will do its drive checks. Currently, the Vanguard is swinging for 33, which means that a front will be hitting. They'll need to guard with a front and a 15k to 2 to pass this. which is probably the best bet because these two other swings are actually bigger. And so if they're going to PG anything, it's going to be this grade 3 at the end of the attack chain. So we flip a trigger, nothing. We hit a front, which is pretty good. It's not a crit, but it'll do here. I'll just move this 10k up because this is rested now. So now we can swing here for 48, and then this unit will go to soul and we'll give this another 5k over here. And then this unit will be absolutely gigantic. This will be 40, 55, 68. That's just a tremendous number. The over trigger guarding doesn't block that unless they've hit defensives. So they have to PG this or die, essentially, because there's a good chance they have to take at least one of these big swings in order to do it. And that's our ideal kill pattern. Now, there was another route to playing this turn out, and I'll show it to you now. So this card will still be plus 10, plus 15. So this will still be plus 25 here. The Vanguard will still be plus 10. And then this column over here will be plus 10. And we still played the Warrior's Rest order, which we forgot to draw a card for, but it's fine. So actually, we would have drawn this, and our drive check would have been another normal unit. So this will be this is the starting circumstances for this turn again. This card has 5k. We'll put this back into soul, and we'll call this one back out to reset the board to how it was. So this is what everything looks like. And instead, this time, we will try to swing after to get a different attack pattern. This pattern is more useful if the opponent is not at 5. So we'll still do this. We're swinging for, we're swinging for 23 on the first swing. We're not boosting yet. We're saving Warrior's Rest for later in the turn. 23 is a 15k guard, but also they're going to have to guard it, but that means they won't have defensives to guard the rest of our turn. Because everything else is a bigger number that's going to require more cards to guard, so they have to start no guarding on like these swings. So then again, we're not going to swing boosted just yet. And this is going to be 25, 38, which is a pretty solid number. 2 15s to guard. And then the Vanguard swings for 33, same as before. We Soul Blast out in Arroz con Leche, same as before. And we stand these and they get additional power. So adding 15k to this would bring it up to 20. And then this card will get another 15k. That's going to bring that number up tremendously. The 33 happens. We assume the same thing happened. We drove check a front. And we get another 10k here. And this unit will need another 10k over here. Now, the reason this pattern can be weaker if they're at 5 is if they're sandbagging 2 PGs, they just PG these last 2. And if they can probably PG with 1 card in hand on this last swing, depending on how their hand looked like. So then we swing here, boosted this time, which means that Warrior's Rest is going to activate, and it's going to get another 10k. So now this attack is 10, 25, 45, 58, 66, which is hitting over the over-trigger to guard with. It's a very threatening number. Then this card will go to Soul at the end of battle from its own effect, so that we don't have to use the Vanguard's effect to put it into Soul. And that will give this unit over here another 5k. Then for our last swing, it'll be an absolutely tremendous number. It'll be 40, 55, 68, 73, 83, and then another 10k on top of that because of the effect of Warrior's Rest. So it'll actually be 93. Now, the reason this pattern is not as good as it looks is because at like the number 63 or so, or 68 or whatever we got last time we did this, that number is already basically a perfect guard to guard or die. This is just going to be in the same situation. They're only going to survive this if they have a perfect guard, and if they did have a perfect guard, we'd rather have had the previous swing have a little bit more power so that that swing was also threatening to guard and demanded more cards out of their hand, especially this column, which was just a 23 on the first swing through. So we can still put them in a scenario where they need perfect guard to live, although this technically gives them outs to guard if they hit multiple defensives. It's basically the same way either way. Like either they're forced to guard a bunch of medium-sized numbers that demand about 2 cards out of their hand, or they're able to guard a card that demands 1 card out of their hand, no guard this, and then have to deal with guarding these last 2 big attacks, which means they can probably, if they have a perfect guard, go all in on guarding this, and then PG with the last card to guard this. And the Vanguard is not that hard a 2 to pass. It's a 35k shield 2 to pass, and this deck doesn't thin as much as some other decks, and it also doesn't get additional drives, so that twin drive is not going to be that scary. So that's the 2 best attack patterns for this deck. This one is really good if you know they don't have perfect guards. It's just going to throw an absolutely tremendous number at the end and mitigate their ability to survive from a defensive. The other line is going to demand multiple cards on every attack in order to potentially pressure them into no guarding at 5 so that they can try to hit a heal. That's the deck, though. As you can see, this deck hits pretty good numbers. Even though it's playing a bunch of commons and rares and other cards that don't have very many effects, most of these cards that are good only have effects that give themselves a little bit more power and not a broken amount, except for this card, which hits a lot of power. Mostly we're being carried here by the strength of Arroz con Leche's restand ability. Giving 15k to your 2 rear guards is really good, it turns out, especially when they already have their own power boosts and when you're on Persona Ride. So while this deck is not plussing, not searching, not really developing resources or doing anything unfair, it is just hitting big numbers with a pile of commons. And that's pretty strong. And you could see how this deck could be really good if we got actually good Divine Sisters to support it. Perhaps a Divine Sister that would count as being named as Arroz con Leche if we Soul Blast it. Or perhaps Divine Sisters that either could call other Divine Sisters from deck that were good. Like, if we had a Divine Sister, let us call this from deck, guaranteed, like a hard search effect, we would be sitting pretty. Or if we had a way to draw more cards, like a Divine Sister that drew a card when it was restood by your Vanguard or something, or a Divine Sister that gives your Vanguard +1 drive if it's named Arroz con Leche. There's a bunch of things they could add to this deck that would be reasonable cards that would only be buffing an archetype that is already not very good in the grand scheme of Vanguard, and really would only take 1 or 2 buffs in not even that strong buffs to make this deck significantly more powerful. And then it could be a deck you could take to your locals and win if you played it correctly, and if you got some luck with your early rush, probably not hitting defenses, or you hit some triggers. This deck probably, unless Bushiroad decides to just go all in on supporting it, this deck will probably never be a tier 1 deck. We all know that. But this deck is already in this state with a bunch of bad cards, a perfectly fine deck to take to a casual tournament or to play with your friends and you can have a good time with it, which I think is sometimes really all we want. Not everything has to be, a super broken competitive deck. So that's it for now. I'm having so much fun playing this. I kind of am addicted. I'm supposed to be playing other decks to practice for BSF Irving, but I keep just playing this in tournament instead. So I hope you build this and enjoy it. It's really cheap. If you don't play this card, then this deck is pennies for most of the cards in it. Divine Sister Arroz con Leche is really cheap on her own, and she's one of the less wanted promos, so you might be able to just ask people at your locals if they've pulled any of her and get them for cheap or free. I've literally had people throw me an entire playset of Arroz con Leche because I mentioned I wanted to build the deck, and nobody else wanted the promos, and they didn't sell for anything. The foils are down to like $10, so if you want to foil out all of your Arroz con Leches, it's only $40 to do so, which is not the worst, especially considering that it's a promo card. It could be a lot worse. But yeah, there's not really anything else expensive in here. If you play that Teeth Vault Saragon order package that I mentioned, that'll get out of hand. I think Divine Sister Biscottis might still be worth some money, but I'm not sure. I haven't checked the price on those in a while. But everything in this deck is like commons, or single rare, or double rare. So that means it's very affordable to build, and you could have a deck that's a blast to play for probably maybe a little over $20, maybe like $30 total if you don't play the expensive cards that I added. And that's it for now. Have fun building this and beating people to death with it. Like, it's a meme deck until you hit for 68, and then it's no longer a meme deck. And as always, see you next time.